Welcome to Retroality TV presents Reimagine That with Chris Mann, offering refreshing reality with a retro twist. This week we have part 2 of Chris's exclusive interview with actress Jaime Lyn Bauer. Then Chris discusses comfort TV with television historian and blogger David Hofstede. And once again we'll dive deep into our subconscious minds with our very own dreamweaver, Yvonne Riva. And now, introducing your host, Chris Mann.
Thank you, Linda Kay, our vintage-voiced announcer and producer. And hi again, everyone. It is June 14th, 2013, and this is episode 20 of Reimagine That, the Retroality.tv podcast, where retropop meets forward thought. This is your host, Chris Mann. We have a big show today, so I will try to keep this brief. We have part 2 of our exclusive interview with iconic soap star Jaime Lyn Bauer, Lorie Brooks of Young and the Restless, Dr. Laura Horton of Days of Our Lives. In part 2, she talks about, among other things, recently being approached, her agent was, by producers of The Young and the Restless to return for a week's filming for the 40th anniversary season. That has not come to fruition yet, but fans of the classic soap certainly hope it does. Y&R has been in the news, of course, not only for that milestone anniversary, but for the sad recent passing of its grand dame star, Jeanne Cooper. In part 1, Jaime emotionally shared her remembrances of her very close relationship with Jeanne Cooper. This Sunday, June 16th, on HLN News, the Daytime Emmys will air live, and in that broadcast, Jeannie's son Corbin Burnson and her co-star Jess Walton, who for the last quarter of a century has played Catherine Chancellor's arch nemesis Jill Foster on The Young and the Restless. Jess and Corbin will open an in memoriam segment with a tribute to Jeannie, so you won't want to miss that. Also putting Y&R in the news of late, and not in a very good light, the original Jill Foster, actress Brenda Dixon, has released her memoir, My True Hidden Hollywood Story. It's her version of what went down during her time on Young and the Restless. She was fired from the show in the mid-'80s. And she talks about that experience, and she also has claims of sexual harassment against the series creator, the late William Bell, and talks about all the things that she's gone through in the last 25 years after being fired, and she says blacklisted from the industry because of William Bell. This is Brenda's story. And she talks about various legal turmoil and personal strife that she's had in her life, and she traces it all back to the Bell family. It's very interesting. She released it as an ebook in April. A hardback version is coming up soon. It also has what I can say is very interesting timing in connection with Jeannie's unexpected passing in May. Right around the time Brenda's ebook was published, Jeannie took ill. And less than a month later, Jeannie was gone. I'm sure that Brenda has been working on her book for years, but I read the ebook recently, and she says some not very flattering things about Jeannie's alcoholism, and she puts it out there in the vein of saying that William Bell was exploitive of the cast, exploitive of Jeanne Cooper's condition, exploitive of Brenda, and so on. Jeanne Cooper, in her book, Not Young, Still Restless, which was put out a year or two ago, she really only has very positive things to say about William Bell and about Brenda Dixon. So I thought, what unfortunate timing that this book has come out. Who knew that Jeannie would succumb to this illness that came on pretty fast? Jeannie was such a survivor. I don't think Brenda anticipated Jeannie would go, but now Brenda's got this book out there that I imagine will raise some eyebrows, and I imagine some people will say that it's very insensitive given the recent passing of Jeannie. It's all very interesting. Check it out at brendadixon.com. Jaime Lyn talks some here in part 2 about Brenda, She worked with her in the 70s. Brenda's problems on Y&R really transpired in the mid-80s, although she does say that she had an affair with William Bell. Maybe it was a one-night stand in the early 70s, so it's all very interesting. And one more Y&R note, our good friend Pavan at Sitcoms Online on his incredible news blog recently reported that TV Guide Network will air same-day reruns of The Young and the Restless beginning on July 1st and will air weekdays at 7 p.m. and then again the next day at 10 a.m. So that'll be great if you've missed Y&R that day. I would love to see vintage reruns of Young and the Restless, and I know I'm not alone, particularly the 70s and the 80s. The first decade the show was on with Jaime Lyn and Brenda and David Hasselhoff and Tom Selleck and Jeannie Cooper, of course, and John McCook and many other great actors. That was a rich era of the show, and most of those early episodes are half hour. So TV Guide Network, let's license those and let's see them again. Retro TV is really becoming in vogue. We've known that here for a long time, but now the industry is starting to get it. There are some growing nostalgia networks, including Antenna TV, the Retro TV Network, and MeTV, which stands for Memorable Entertainment Television. News just hit that they just passed 90% clearance and signed on 3 more great television stations. So their presence is growing across the U.S. I would love to see them in Santa Barbara County. We don't get MeTV here. We don't get Antenna TV on our Comcast cable, but hopefully that will change soon. Also, news hit recently that former network executive Garth Ancier is planning to do for cable TV what Sirius Satellite has done for radio in terms of retro networks. He wants to do 4 cable networks devoted to the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, airing classic hits, some more obscure sitcoms and dramas, and he is proposing that if anyone can get this done, it's Garth Ancier. He was back in NBC in the early 80s under Brandon Tartikoff when Brandon made that network with series like Cheers and Family Ties and The Cosby Show. And then Garth went on to, he's been practically at every other network, and now he's doing his own thing with his own company, Zeus Media. So stay tuned. These would all be high definition channels. How great would that be to see unedited, high-def episodes of our favorite hits, things we haven't seen in decades. We talk about that in this episode in our Reality Reimagine segment with my friend David Hofstede, who runs the great nostalgia blog Comfort TV. So after Jaime Lyn, stay tuned for my interview with David, and then after that, we'll have another interesting segment with our Dreamweaver, Yvonne Reba. Great show today. And now I am pleased to present part 2 of our exclusive, emotional, inspiring interview with actress Jaime Lyn Bauer. We talk some more about the classic era of Y&R, the 70s and the early 80s when she was Lorie Brooks on the show, the original bad girl turned heroine. She returned in 2002 for a limited engagement, had some interesting interactions with various characters on the show, including Jack Abbott. I asked her about possibly returning as Lorie Brooks, and wouldn't it be interesting if Lorie hooked up with Jack? Michelle Stafford is leaving Y&R. She has played Jack's on-again, off-again girlfriend, Phyllis, and I think it's time for another redhead to get in there and give Jack Abbott a run for his money. So stay tuned, and we will also hear what Jaime has been up to outside of the acting sphere, reinventing herself along with her husband in the financial sphere with a group called People Helping People. So stick around, and we will go back in time and flash forward with Jaime Lyn Bauer.
Dreams of the past. With the love that moved to
You know, you had mentioned your first 6 months there that Bill Bell hated you.
Yeah.
How did your relationship with him evolve? Was it a challenging one because he obviously loved your character so much? Were there bumps along the way, or did it just gradually improve?
You know, after that first 6 months and after John's help and after my going and studying my character, because before that, I mean, at that time of my life, I was quite innocent and wore little Edwardian cap sleeve clothes and didn't dress in a provocative manner at all. And so it just took me a while to, of course, I thought that they were hiring me to play myself, and I had a choice at the time that I accepted, and I screen tested for Y&R because Universal was offering me a 7-year, was one of the last players contracts in town, and it was with Universal Studios. And they wanted me for 7 years. I had signed on and been hired to do a show called Quester for Gene Roddenberry at Universal. And what happened was they started messing around with Gene Roddenberry's script.
Oh.
And so he got mad and he pulled the whole show. And Quester was a show about a robot who was a private investigator, like Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
And I was his sidekick. So when Gene got upset over them messing with his scripts, he just declared, that's it, I'm never going to go on a network show again, which, as you know, he didn't. Next time you saw him was the Next Generation Star Trek, which was on UPN, right? And he turned that character into Data.
Oh, I'll be darned.
Who was number one and loved to go in the whatever deck it was and pretend he was Sherlock Holmes. That's what he did with that character.
I did not realize that. So you had this sort of fork in the road of, do you go with Universal or do you go with Y&R?
Exactly. And I, at that point, I'd only been in the business a month.
Oh, gosh.
And so I was a bit overwhelmed, and I thought, okay, nobody watches soaps.
How wrong you would be.
Yes. And so I could go on to a soap and really hone my craft, and no one would notice. I could become a real actress, you know, from a modeling background. And I thought this would be the thing to do rather than, and of course, as a model, I was used to being free. I thought if somebody owns me for 7 years, I couldn't even imagine, especially as a young woman.
Yeah.
You know, that just was beyond. So I turned down the 7-year contract with Universal, and I took the 3-year contract with Young and Restless. And then, of course, as you know, it changed daytime television. It
did. It revolutionized the genre. My mother, my grandmother, many generations in my family loved that show and across America. So as your character developed and became more and more central to nearly every episode of the show, did that bring you and Bill closer?
Bill and I were on very warm terms. I think I was much closer in a certain sense to his wife.
Lee?
Lee, yes, because I'd done her show several times in Chicago back when she had a show in Chicago. And I had been to their home in Chicago. I'd been to their home in Wisconsin, and I think it was Wisconsin, like Geneva, anyway. And I knew the kids when they were little. Well, the boys were teenagers. They were in high school. And I had met them all when I was out there. But with Bill, you know, I don't know. I think I was never quite certain. You know, you have to have boundaries with people that are your employers.
Right.
And your producer, your director. So you become friendly with them, but only to a certain degree. I knew the people at CBS. At one point, after my first baby, I was going to leave, and NBC had not handled. It was actually Coal Gems, I guess, at that point. Anyway, CBS ended up buying my contract out.
Oh.
So I was owned actually by CBS, and I worked on Young and Restless at the last few years of the show. And that worked out well. But even then, even knowing the head of the network, and in those days, daytime paid for 70% of nighttime because it was so cheap to do daytime. And we all started. When I started Young and Restless, I made $250 a show, you know.
Golly.
So, you know, we all started little, And of course, we still, compared to nighttime actors or film actors, especially now, I mean, they've cut everyone's pay in half. They cut my pay in half.
Yeah.
And this is not just actors. This is stage managers. This is, set designers. This is the writers. Everybody since 2008 has taken a hit for the most part. I mean, maybe not film actors, but in daytime or in television, it's very apparent.
Just to stay afloat, they've had to. It is a definite different reality now. And, I ask in part about Bill Bell because I've heard so many great stories about him, just what a visionary he was. And
He was brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. And in the end, when I exercised an out in my contract, he was, and I had to thank him, several years later with tears in my eyes, because I was so exhausted. And they had refused, when I was doing contract negotiations, they had refused to put a ceiling of 3 shows a week in my contract without my permission.
Oh.
And I couldn't continue working the way I was working. I had too much of the writer's dialogue in my head and not enough of my own memory left to handle and manage my children from afar with a nanny. And I was not seeing things, and it was kind of scary because I'm really sharp. I have a very fine mind, and all of a sudden I had pieces that were missing because your conscious mind can only retain so much information at a time.
That is scary.
And so that's why I wanted to limit it. They wouldn't agree to it, so I ended up leaving. And as Bill and I were talking, I just said, Bill, whatever you do, I'm just telling you, I feel like I'm going to break. And if you lay anything on me about it's going to ruin this person's career, it's going to ruin this for so-and-so, or what, all the stuff that had happened over the years with, my producer or my somebody or the network telling me this or that. Anyway, the point is that Bill was so amazing because he had already decided that if I left, that he was going to fire my entire family and make a new show under the name Young and Restless. And he did not tell me that. If he had told me that, I would have stayed because I loved the other actors. They were my family, too. So I would have protected them. But he didn't. He let me go.
That's interesting.
And I thanked him with tears in my eyes. And I told him part of what had gone down. I went back several years later. I went to see he and Lee and sat and told them some of the personal stuff that had been going on. And she had tears in her eyes rolling down her face.
Oh.
They were so lovely. It's like, real life goes on.
Yeah.
And, as much as we play these characters, although it was weird, when I quit playing her, I came home and I'd go to throw something on, right? And I'd go, that's not me. That's her. I wouldn't wear that. Because I did have this little kind of freak out for a couple of months trying to go, okay, so this really is Lorie, but this is me,
Finding your identity a bit.
Exactly. After being dressed like her for 9 years,
Yeah, she was so part of you, and you're retaining this dialogue and her identity and all that drama.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to hear you say that about Bill Bell. I've heard so many nice things about him. I don't know if you're aware, Brenda Dixon has a memoir coming up, and it's really kind of explosive, and she's saying not nice things about Bill Bell. They may have been said things that she has said in the past, like on the True Hollywood Story. Does any of that resonate? I mean, were you aware of any?
I have no idea what she said. Let's face it, we were all very young. And, when you're young, you're kind of messed up.
Yeah.
You got all your family issues from childhood, and you haven't processed them all yet, and yet you have to act like an adult, and you have to be in the real world. And so we had a lot of drama going on. And Brenda was young with the rest of us, and I didn't ever hang out with her or anything, so I didn't know what any of her personal drama was. But Bill, he could be tough. you weren't sure sometimes if you could trust him.
Mm-hmm.
At least that was always in my mind. So it was always, I was friendly and we were close up to a degree, but there was always that professionalism that always was maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that I wasn't always sure that I could trust what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, in the end, what I saw was he made a great sacrifice, and he put me and my wholeness and personal well-being before the show.
That's very
and
nice.
That was a game changer altogether.
As much as he loved Lorie Brooks, this character that he had named after his daughter, for crying out loud, and as core as you were to that show, like I said, I vividly recall, did Lorie push Vanessa off when Vanessa plummeted to her death to frame you for murder? You were really the Erica Kane of Young and the Restless, so it had to be tough to let you go as the creator of the show and as the writer and the guy who envisioned this. It had to be tough to let you go. So on one hand, maybe it was he had to let the whole family go when you left just to be able to move on. I would have loved to have asked them that question, his thinking behind that.
Yeah, and I wonder, maybe perhaps Lee knows. I don't know. I didn't know what the sort of thought process was. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We never discussed that. When I realized afterward that the other people were fired and what he was doing. In fact, I think I met him the first time after I'd left. I ran into him at, when they did what was it? It's some kind of museum, some kind of museum that's down near where the Screen Actors Guild is and everything on Wilshire Boulevard or something. Anyway, I had gone there and it was the opening night and it was sort of doing soap opera stuff there. Anyway, whatever it was. And I ran into him there, and that was the first time I thanked him. I did it a couple of times, and then, of course, when I did Y&R, however many years ago it was, they were amazing with me, and he saw me on camera. He was there, saw me on camera, and asked me to come up when I finished shooting, and that was so lovely because he was so sweet. He was, like all of us, we mature.
You do.
We learn how to be, hopefully. What's the point of being alive if you can't learn to be a better human being?
That's right.
And he was just so sweet. It was a sweet 20 minutes I had with him.
And that was in 2002 when you came back for
yes.
quite a while to reprise the role of Lorie.
Yeah, I did 13 episodes, I think.
And, the 40th anniversary this year, longtime fans certainly were hoping that we would see Lorie Brooks again. Had you been approached by Y&R recently?
I had been approached through my agent in January asking if I was available to shoot a specific week in February. And so I stayed in town because I had been planning to leave town. I stayed in town and I waited for the call and I never got it. So I have no idea what happened or what the thinking process was, but I was disappointed.
Yeah, I am too. The first 10 years of that show were the formative years of that show. And certainly the early 80s when it went to an hour. I want to say here on the record that they need to bring you back. How rich would that be? Although not a lot of characters are still on the canvas that were there in the 70s. Jill's still there, but she's kind of a different Jill from, but Jack Abbott was there, Nikki and Victor, Paul Williams.
Yeah.
There are some possibilities there to bring Lorie back into the fold. Would that be fun for you as an actor?
I'd love it. I'd love it.
Where would you see Lorie at this point in her life? Because the last time we saw her, she was kind of trying to frame Victor, but then had a change of heart.
Yeah. Well, let's face it. She was in between marriages. She was on a rebound, wondering if she hadn't made a mistake with that other guy who wanted Nikki, I think she was, obviously whatever went down with she and Lance, it was over.
Right.
And so, I think she was just taking her best shot. Gee, maybe I shouldn't have crawled out the window and left him at the altar,
The only woman to do that to Victor.
Yeah. But, no, it'd be great if she just moved back into town for whatever reason, right? Whether she's married or not married or, is coming there. Maybe she's got a new person that she's fallen for, a new publisher, a new whatever. Who knows?
She would be interesting with Jack Abbott.
Yes.
I think.
Now, do you remember the scenes that I did with him when I was there?
With Peter Bergman?
With Peter Bergman.
Yes, I do.
I was amazed because we had almost never had scenes together. Mm-hmm. And so when I came back and we had those scenes about how, I hadn't accepted going to the prom with him because he was a year younger and that kind of stuff, I was so amazed at the chemistry between us.
Yeah. And I just read, I think last night, that Michelle Stafford is leaving the show. And then I thought, what an opportunity there to bring back Lorie, have her hook up with Jack, and see how they do the dance.
that would be fun. That would be a blast. Because he was lovely to work with.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and it was so natural. It was so easy. It was just so fun too, with the stuff about Nikki and everything. It's like,
oh, great stuff.
But I really liked that, and I'd never worked with him before. So as I said, I thought those were some of the best scenes.
I do too.
Yeah. So, gee, if only you could put it in their ear.
I'm going to do my best. I read the message boards, and when your return to Days was announced, so many people were saying, she's got to come back as Lorie. And, the 40th anniversary is a year long, and you came into the show at the end of 73, so how perfect would it be later this year to see Lorie back?
Wow.
What rich history there to explore and to mine. Would you be up for a Bold and the Beautiful reunion with John McCook?
Of course. John is just delightful. We even had our children both went to Notre Dame, so I got to see them, at football games and fairs and stuff at the school, and he is a delight. I adore him.
Oh, well, there you go.
It would be great. It would be great to work with him.
Well, we're thrilled to see you back. You've raised your children. Congrats on that achievement alone.
Thank you. My youngest is just turned 18 and is graduating high school. And she goes off to college in the fall. And we'll be empty nesters again.
Yeah.
Although I'll have my first grandbaby. So
maybe it's time for you to come back to daytime. I just feel that it is. You're involved now, if you can talk a bit about people helping people and what you're doing now and what you hope to do in the near future with your creative passions.
Wow. Well, once my daughter's off, I can actually go back to my writing. She's actually agreed to do some of the graphics. I have 2 children's stories. The second one I have to finish. The first one is finished. I'd like her to do. She's a very talented artist.
Great.
And I'd like her to do the graphics for the book, books, I should say. And I can go back. I was writing a script based on one of my grandmother's books. My grandmother was a best-selling biblical authoress. She was an authority on the ancient Jewish culture.
Oh, wow.
And I had started writing a script, and then it just got too crazy. Too crazy.
Yeah.
And I thought, these are, the last 2 kids, and I need to pay attention, and I need to be present, and so I sort of put all that on the side. I even taught myself to do watercolors, and then my husband and I, the industry was hit so hard in 2008, and we were waiting for the phone to ring, and it wasn't ringing, and our second eldest son had said, Mom and Dad, you can't just sit there waiting for the phone to ring. And he said, I'm with a company, we do financial services, and we basically do it for the millions of people who have never had financial education at all. Because if you don't have $250,000, Miss Barney and Dean Witter and the others are not going to talk to you. And you're not going to have a personal banker, who, by the way, only deals in stuff that doesn't even make money for you at this point. So you're not going to have a personal banker either unless you've got $250,000 sitting in accounts.
That's true.
So we had always had people who managed things for us, and it was a little intimidating thinking, oh my gosh, we're not smart enough to do this. This is so foreign to us. But we joined the company, and we started training, and we started studying for our licenses, and, by the state of California. My husband and I went together downtown to take our tests and passed with flying colors, got our fingerprinting and everything, and that's what we've been doing for the past couple of years, is financial services. And it's so rewarding to go into just regular people's homes and, talk to them about what their dreams are. Do they want to put their kids through college or not? Do they want to buy a new house or a bigger house? Do they like to travel? What are your hopes and dreams? How are you going to get there, right? And so we make suggestions if they're interested in our coming back. The first appointment is always free. But the coolest thing is just getting to know people, and I can see what they need. Do you know what I mean? It's just kind of an instinctive thing. I can read beneath the line because I'm used to studying body language. And as an actor, do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I'm actors are taught to respond, and you're watching people's eyes and their face and their expression and their body language. And so it's easier for me sometimes than my husband even to pick up things that are not being said but are still there, and to sort of get an idea of what kind of suggestions we can make. And so if they want us to come back a second time, we do that, and we bring them ideas about what we think that would take them from where they are currently to where they want to be in 20, 30, 40 years, however old they are. And
that's great.
And the cool thing is there's some great vehicles available that I wish we had been invested in. And that's life insurance products today are, amazing. And the wealthy know about life insurance and how to structure different things. There are amazing products out today. And we also sell annuities. We do medical. And it's a whole new world. My son is a full-blown stockbroker.
He is.
And so, he works within the company. So if we need somebody who, in other words, we have a client, one of our clients who likes to gamble, and he bought an annuity, but he also wanted mutual funds and stuff like that. And so we bring my son in, and he does that kind of stuff because he's licensed to do it. So
that's terrific.
And we love the CEO. We love the vision of the company. The CEO is an amazing visionary himself and loves this nation and really realizes how much we have to get back to understanding the free enterprise system, how much we need to go back to starting our own businesses. Because we've gone as a nation from having 95% of the people 100 years ago were small business owners.
I'll be darned.
5% were employees. And today it is, I think, because it's dropped in the past few years, I think it's something like 11% now, small business owners.
Wow.
And the rest are employees. And as you know, everything's shifted in corporate America. So you can't just join a company and have a 401k and think then that you could retire or even have job security.
Yeah, it's very unstable.
It's very unstable. So especially for us to know that we can represent a field that is so secure. They didn't have any problem during the 1929 crash. Life insurance companies that's when annuities really became popular because it was the only place that you could actually gain interest on your money and have a retirement for life, right?
Yeah.
In other words, receive money for life and at the same time not worry about losing. You couldn't lose. But they have other products, index universal life policies of different types that are just phenomenal. Just incredible.
You've certainly learned a lot about the area of finance, which I think any creative person should have that element to them. So many of us don't.
Correct.
So that's a great thing to have.
And but the company we have is reduced it to such a simple way, in a sense. In other words, the way that they teach us and the way that we continue to learn and the way that we can rely on the experience of people who are very experienced, right, at the same time. In other words, we're not on our own, but we are on our own. And so it's an interesting system. It's great. The stuff is just phenomenal. And you're taught, this company really teaches men and women to be leaders. And that's really, if you look at the problem in our nation today, especially in government, the problem is we have no true leaders.
Yeah.
We have people who want to say they're leaders, but when the buck, right? You know what I mean? The buck is supposed to stop with that leader, and you have to learn to be a servant leader. You have to learn to treat people right. And they so believe in personal development that they assign you books. They want you to read Millionaire Mind. They want you to read Love and Respect, how a husband and wife function together or should be functioning in a healthy manner together, right? So the Screw Tape Letters is on the reading list. I mean, the most amazing wide range of literature, of just, develop yourself, because you're going to go in and you're going to meet people who are all over the map as far as socioeconomic background.
Yes.
And the more that we understand about different things, the more we can relate to them. And as you develop yourself, it's great. A woman, for instance, in our office isn't allowed ever to move her chair. Men are taught to be men. And we have every color, every race, every grouping that you could imagine in our office. It's really fun. I don't even know how many languages the people in there speak. I wouldn't even want to guess.
That's very interesting.
They're awesome. So we really enjoyed it. And now, let's see, we have I have 7 children right now when I add my 2 married children and, their spouses, right?
Oh, goodness.
So out of the 7 of them, 6 of them own one of these products. And I'm
great.
Thrilled because they will never experience what we've experienced recently with 2008, where everyone lost so much money because we were totally in the stock market.
Well, goodness, you really have sort of reinvented yourself while raising your kids. You've developed this whole other profession for yourself. What's your dream at this point? You're going to have your empty nest. What's going to be your dream in the year or so ahead?
I'd love to go back to work full time. I would love to work on my last script, finish my books, get them out, see about getting them published. And, I'll be able to travel more. I'll be able to hang out with my friends more. We're figuring on working for a while longer because our kids, your kids are in college. They still come home. I've got another 5 years probably before the kids are really grown enough to be established. And again, those are our children motivate us.
Yes.
Is it easy to remake yourself at my husband's and my age? Absolutely not. It is not. But you know what? The choice of sitting back and just being passive and being a victim just are stupid.
That's right.
And we all need to just step up to the plate. And if it means going back to school, or it means getting re-educated, or it means taking a risk, that's what established this nation in the first place. That's what Americans were built on. And that's what's made this country great. And it's okay. It's a good thing. It's good to have your mind working and to be learning and to meet different types of people. You just grow. Why wouldn't you want to continue doing that no matter how old you are?
That's right. Very inspirational words. So it's funny that you talk about all of your writing projects, Lorie Brooks being an author, of course. Where would you see her today in her evolution? Do you see her as a businesswoman? Do you see her as an artist? Somewhere in between?
Oh, I'd like her to just be as wild, in a sense, more wise, but in a sense free-spirited, as she's always been. Because, for instance, they could have made films out of her books.
Right.
Naked at Dawn. Come on, what a title, right? It's like, they could have made films out of her books. She could have been to Hollywood and met all these people and done all these things that she, which would be in line with the way, she studied in France, right? She went to school in France. It's like at Sorbonne. And it's like, hey, why not?
Bring some of that experience, and that would bring her a whole new level of cunning, of sophistication. To see her back in the mix would be intriguing.
Yeah, but I would have to say, because she's so bright, that she learned a few things along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully at this point, there's a part of her that also wants to settle and be stable. You know, because while the traveling and the meeting new people and interesting and having these, the kind of life that most of us sort of dream about, you know, people who are on the road all the time and doing stuff like that and have all these they're so happy to have a home-cooked meal.
Right.
You know what I mean? They get sick. It doesn't matter how nice the hotel or how fabulous the food is. They want to be at home. There's the other side of it, too. And when you know people who do that, you see how much they'd like a more stable environment, particularly as they get older.
It sounds like it's time for her to come back home to Genoa City. And so we are rallying for that. I have one more question for you, Jaime. When will we be reading your memoir, your autobiography? Because clearly you have some incredible stories and quite a journey from Hollywood and beyond.
You know, I had written a few paragraphs a few years ago, and of course I kind of tabled everything to focus on the kids. And I would imagine in the next year or so, I might write an autobiography. I want one of those programs, because typing, and especially because I'm such a perfectionist, and I have to have all my punctuation and my spelling right and all this other stuff, and it's like so laborious. How far can I go?
Yes.
So I would like to have one of those programs that just kind of types it for you.
Oh, I got one of those, like the Dragon. I think that's what they call it.
Is it Dragonfly? I've heard of. I don't know, but I want one of those programs when I get a new computer soon, I hope, because my poor old Mac. I need a PC instead. And if I had one of those programs, it would be easier for me to write.
There you go. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I understand. Well, it's so touching to hear your memories of Gene Cooper and YNR and everything since. So what a book that would be. And I thank you so much for this trip down memory lane and looking into the future. It's been fun.
Thank you so much. It has been fun. Thank you for asking me, Chris. Such a pleasure talking with you.
It's been my pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you back in daytime real soon.
Thanks. From your mouth to God's ears, okay?
We'll work on it. Take care, Jaime.
All right. Bless you. Bye-bye.
Dreams of the past, gone with the love that moved too fast.
Men's and Women's Fashion by Giorgio's of Beverly Hills. Join us again for the young and the restless. Stay tuned for Search for Tomorrow, next on most of these stations.
For 40 years, fans of The Young and the Restless have taken comfort in that show, tuning in every weekday to get that feeling of nostalgia, of childhood, of the 70s and 80s that are times long gone but not forgotten. And the same holds true for classic sitcoms, dramas, Saturday morning TV, and other TV rarities from past decades. And our friend, TV historian David Hofstede, has created a great new blog that pays proper homage to these shows of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Comfort TV. Check it out at comforttv.blogspot.com. David is a TV historian who's written 12 books on TV and pop culture, and he is here now with us today to share some of his thoughts on classic television and why we need to preserve our memories and have a place to hang out online where we remember that comfy feeling that we always got watching those classics of the past. David, it is an honor to have you here today as our Reality Reimagined guest. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's good to speak to you again after quite a few years.
Quite a few years, back when we were young in the TV book days.
Yes, back when there were TV book days.
When there were, and when there were bookstores.
Yes.
As many fans of books on TV know, you're a noted TV historian who's authored several great tomes on the medium, including a couple of my favorites, Companion Guides to the Dukes of Hazzard, Charlie's Angels, the Charlie's Angels case book, written with our friend Jack Condon. Now you've got a great new blog called Comfort TV, comforttv.blogspot.com. After such a long run in print publishing, what prompted your site and what's your mission with it?
Well, the short answer to that is that I wanted to write about these topics. And as you well know from your own experience, the outside world has sort of changed, particularly the publishing community, as far as what type of books they're interested in.
Yes.
And it's been scaled down so severely over the past 5 or 10 years, and I still think there's a lot of interest in these subjects. There are a lot of great websites, such as yours and hopefully one day mine, that present this type of material, and there's a lot of great discussions going on sites like Home Theater Forum and places like that. And now people, when they want to talk about the Mary Tyler Moore Show, when they want to talk about the Brady Bunch, this is the first place that they start looking for that information. So if you want to reach that audience, this is the place where you have to be. And, I mean, as a writer who's been used to being paid for his work for 20-some years, there is that adjustment that you have to make. But, I am still getting paid for writing about other topics, and I have clients and freelance opportunities that are open to me. But to talk about the things that I really enjoy talking about, and it's been kind of a personal passion for a long time, you just have to set up your own space and hope people will eventually find you and enjoy what you're talking about.
And they will, and they are. Facebook, of course, is a great tool to get the word out, and we're happy to do our little part in getting the word out about Comfort TV. Let's go back to your formative years. Your website says you were an introvert and an only child. How did that experience help shape the genres and the eras of television that are your focus for Comfort TV?
Well, I think everybody kind of bonds most closely with the television shows that they grow up with, up till about age 12 or 13 especially. And for me, of course, that was not really the primetime shows, although a lot of those I enjoyed as well, but the shows that were on TV when you came home from school at 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. So for me, that was the Brady Bunch, and that was Batman, and that was I Love Lucy. And even oddly enough, in Chicago, where I grew up, the WGN network started running the Mickey Mouse Club, the shows from the 1950s.
Oh, those are golden.
And I loved watching those. I had never seen those anywhere else. And then, of course, when Disney Channel was running them early on in their run, I made a habit of watching them there as well. And even though they obviously came from another era, even from the era that I grew up with, it seemed like such a nice place to visit and spend some time. And I think that's true of all of the types of shows that I've sort of loosely referred to as Comfort TV. It's a really nice place to visit, and maybe you actually would want to live there.
Unlike most of the fare that's on TV today, including network sitcoms, which have such a sort of a harsh, dark tone to them, it is nice to go back to lighter times, even the 80s, the 70s and 80s. So your website really covers which decades especially, the 60s, 70s?
Yeah, and I just finished a series of pieces for the site on the most essential shows from every decade. And I started that with the 50s, and I ended it with the 1980s, because I said that was really the last decade that, to me, falls into the classic TV/comfort TV era. And I think what changed is, first of all, people started to have cable and satellite, and all of a sudden they had 300 channels to choose from. And secondly, by the 80s, the VCR had started to have some real penetration into people's homes, and then obviously after that you had the TiVos and the DVRs. So we're no longer in that time when everybody was watching the same shows at the same time.
Right.
And so that communal experience of watching a great TV show isn't there anymore. So
Good point.
even the shows like Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad that get so many great reviews and win so many Emmy Awards are being watched by a minuscule percentage of the overall population. And
Yes.
so they're really not having the same pop culture penetration that the shows that I grew up with seem to have.
That's a very good point. And, I wish that book publishers, for example, would realize this, because even with the advent of social media, Twitter, Facebook, and popular sort of cult-like shows like Game of Thrones, the audience is so splintered. There is still, I would argue, a bigger audience for a book about the Brady Bunch or a book about classic TV in general. So you're right. Even though we do have these ways to connect online now, there really isn't that communal experience that you had back in the day with 3 networks.
No, and the publishers are just focused on what's happening now and the next big thing. And I'll never forget about, I think 2 years ago, I was in L.A. and I walked into a bookstore there, and just out of habit, I went into the entertainment section, as small as it was, for television books. Mm-hmm. And there were 5 books about Glee.
Oh, wow.
On the shelf, and pretty much nothing else in the section. So, I mean, they're still willing to jump on a trend, but they don't recognize the value of the older shows or the people that grew up with them and still enjoy reading about them and talking about them and watching them. Thankfully, most of them are still popping up on some of the retro TV networks that are available.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you about that. Why, in your estimation, is retro television such an underserved market in cable TV? I mean, Nick at Night and TV Land aren't what they once were.
No, they're not. And there are a couple of networks like MeTV and Antenna that are doing a pretty good job with these shows. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I can only estimate that perhaps the people who are programming, who are in these large corporations that now own all of these properties, and everything has become so entrenched, I guess is the word I'm looking for. You have one company that owns 50 stations now, 50 different networks, whereas it's more difficult for someone who comes up and loves this stuff to say, I'm going to do something with this. And there's so many legal obligations and so much red tape that you have to cut through.
Yes.
And I guess they just don't see that they're going to get that kind of response. Although I'm sure you've heard that there's some company that seems to be on the verge of trying this again.
Yes.
Doing some networks devoted to different decades in TV history, which is, I wish them the best of luck with that, because I think that would be a wonderful thing to add to people's viewing options.
I read about that. I think it's Zeus Media, run by a former network executive, Garth Ancier, or I think I'm pronouncing his name right. And this guy was part of the NBC lineup during the Brandon Tartikoff days. So if anyone knows what people want to see, and he's proposing setting up these networks by decade, sort of like satellite radio, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 60s. If you had a few dream team choices from those decades, either classic shows that are so part of the fabric of America or lesser seen things, what would you like to see on some of those networks?
Oh, wow. Probably a mix of a little of both, because I'm a TV and DVD collector. I've got so many sets, just floor-to-ceiling bookshelves full of these DVD sets. So, but I would still want to see I Love Lucy and the Dick Van Dyke Show and the Mary Tyler Moore Show and all these shows that are really the core curriculum of a classic TV course, because I want new generations to have a chance to see them. I don't want them to have to go into a store and buy them or try to find them on a streaming site when they have 3,000 other options to choose from. I'd like that there would be a network that they could sort of happen by them and stick around and see what these shows are about, because I honestly believe that if they gave them a chance, they would fall right in with everyone else and really start to enjoy them again. And then
Yes.
I'd like to mix in those with some of the obscurities. I mean, there's a wonderful show from the 60s called The Defenders,
Yep.
which is not on DVD, is rarely, if ever, syndicated, and it was one of the most successful and highly praised shows of its era, and you just don't get a chance to see it anywhere. I'd love to see some of the old variety shows from the 60s and the 70s
Oh, yeah.
come back. That'll never be on DVD, unfortunately, because of the music rights issues that prevent those things from happening. So I'd love to see those again. Maybe some of the old 50s anthology dramatic series like Playhouse 90 and,
Wouldn't that be nice?
And Omnibus that put out some amazing shows for their era. And now, I mean, just imagine doing a 90-minute show live.
Oh, yeah.
Which they did at that time. And, you know, it wasn't that this was unusual for that era, but the level of quality was so high. I mean, these were motion picture length and motion picture caliber scripts and top stars of the era appearing in these shows. So there's certainly no shortage of content for these people if they want to get something like this going. And I would love to see it happen.
It would be great. You know, you mentioned MeTV and Antenna TV. I live in Santa Barbara County now, and we don't get either one of those.
Oh, no.
It's terrible. It's terrible. We get retro TV, but they look like they have, like, no budget. And even though they're showing some rarities, it's like stuff maybe that has been off TV for a reason.
Yeah, well, what I like about MeTV in particular is that it has a little of the old Nick at Night vibe to it, in that they're not just showing these series, they're kind of making a fuss over them. They're kind of presenting them as these are really great shows and you should check these out.
I love it.
And that's what I always loved about Nick at Night, because a lot of the shows they used to air, you know, were on TNT and WGN and, you know, UHF stations for those who go back that far. I mean, it's not like these shows were never on the air before, but Nick at Night was the first one to kind of celebrate them in a way that separated them from just plain old ordinary reruns. And MeTV is doing a little of that as well now.
Well, I'm going to have to get satellite TV. That's just the end of that debate for myself.
And then you'll get 400 other channels that you'll never watch.
Right. Well, you know, we talked about how the internet has changed writing books on TV, but reality TV has changed television, you know, so much. Maybe there's a way to get Snooki to introduce some classic television so people will watch it.
I hope not. I know a lot of my classic TV friends just hate all the reality stuff.
Yeah.
I have to confess, I've enjoyed Survivor almost since the beginning. I've enjoyed Amazing Race almost since the beginning.
Yes.
But I've never cared much for the sort of Jerry Springer brand of reality type shows where you're seeing people act like idiots.
It's
and
so sad.
You basically have lost all their sense of shame just to get on television for a few weeks. That stuff I can do without. But unfortunately, some people are watching. That's just the way the business works.
Well, hopefully, if everything is cyclical, as it seems to have been in the past, that cycle will come to an end, or at least lessen a bit, and we'll get some more classics on TV. You know, online, nostalgia TV and retro pop culture are clearly burgeoning areas of interest. This is certainly true on social media. As a TV historian and a book author, now working in this shorter form on your blog, how do you endeavor to sort of bridge the gap between the Twitter-pated 140 words or less nostalgia and thoughtful, knowledgeable, historical relevance?
Wow.
That's an academic question for you.
I wish I had a grand plan when I launched this to do exactly that. Comfort TV is actually a year old this month, and I mean, honestly, I sit down and write what I think will be interesting, and
you do a great
I just
job.
never know what's going to spark an idea. I can't say there's a whole lot of advanced planning that's been involved. You know, this last series of Essential TV was sparked by a review I read online of the Blu-ray set that was just put out on the Dick Van Dyke Show, where the critic opened the piece by saying that he had never watched an episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Wow.
And this seemed almost unimaginable to
sacrilegious.
me. And not that everybody has to watch TV all the time, but if you work for a pop culture review site and you've never seen an episode of this show,
wow,
where have you been?
Where have you been?
And that sort of sparked the idea, well, okay, for people who haven't really paid much attention to this stuff over the years, if you wanted to start, these are the shows from the 50s to start with. These are the shows from the 60s, etc.
A primer.
And so it's sort of a little primer, yes, to help people get back up to speed. And the one nice thing, I guess, about the Internet is that a lot of this stuff is as close as Hulu or YouTube or Netflix streaming, so you've got plenty of options now to see some of these shows if you're interested in doing so.
And when I first heard of Hulu, I'm just now really sort of getting a grasp of all social media and YouTube type sites. When I first heard of Hulu, I thought it was like the illegitimate love child of Uhura and Sulu on Star Trek. I'm like, what is Hulu?
Yeah. So you get to watch Alice doing the hula on from the Brady Bunch. Is that Hulu? Is that the same thing?
There you go.
TV shows set in Hawaii.
I'm really dating myself here, but it's a soundbite-driven culture and the social media, 140 words or less. What I like about your site is that you're delivering this information in sort of digestible sizes, but you're still infusing a lot of meaning in it. Do you want to expand this eventually into a book? Do you want to sort of spin off a book based on your website?
Well, oddly, it's kind of started as a book idea. That was the first inspiration for it. And I took that to a couple of publishers to say, people still want to watch these shows over and over again. And new people keep signing on, and people who've been there since they were in prime time still get something out of seeing these episodes again, whether it's the 10th time or the 50th time, and maybe this is something we should look at. Why is this happening? What is it about these shows that keeps the same people coming back? I don't know if there's an equivalent in film. I know there's certain films that have that kind of following, but I think television tends to encourage that a bit more. It's more of a personal relationship, maybe because you're watching it from your home and you're visiting the homes of the characters in the show, and you're not just spending 90 minutes with them as you would in a movie. You're spending 3, 4, 5 years with them and watching them change, watching their kids grow up. It's almost like what you get with a lot of soap opera fans.
Yeah.
There's a real personal connection that forms there. And then when the book just sort of never happened, and I thought I still wanted to write about this stuff, I said, well, I got to do what everybody else does and join the 10 million people with blogs and see what happens. And I didn't want to be too scholarly, although I do think there are elements of these shows that do merit study. I think they're a fascinating look into how people lived in the 50s and 60s and what the work culture was like and what the social culture was like. I think there's a lot of stuff that can be learned from them. But the bottom line is that they're just fun, and they should be fun, and they should be something you can settle down with for 30 or 60 minutes and make your day a little happier. And so that was sort of the same inspiration for the blog.
I agree wholeheartedly with your take on those classic shows, and you clearly have a lot to say on the topic. That's evident through your books and your blog, Comfort TV, and I'm excited for your blog. I look forward to what's next, and we'll post all of the links to your site. Do you have a Facebook page yet for Comfort TV?
I do not. I'm afraid I'm a little bit behind the technological times as well. But one of these days, hopefully, it was not even done as a business thing. It was done more as a personal passion. I don't even want people to go there and click on links to buy these shows on DVD. It's just a place to read and talk about great TV shows. That's all it was meant to be.
Wonderful. Well, I'm thrilled that you're doing it, and I like how you have sort of taken this new time and you've adapted to it. Like I said, I've had to reimagine my reality as a TV book writer too. So your work is inspirational, and we look forward to hearing more from you, David.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, and I've been a big fan of your site since the beginning. So
thank you, sir.
It was one of the reasons that kind of convinced me to get on board with this and get it up and running.
Very cool. Well, we'll have to keep linking each other and stay in touch.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
We We look forward to hearing more and reading more from David Hofstede. In the meantime, check out his website, comforttv.blogspot.com, and also look online and check out some of his books, including Obsessed with TV and What Were They Thinking? The 100 Dumbest Events in Television History. His Guide to Charlie's Angels, co-written with Jack Condon, was adapted by NBC as a TV movie. That may be on DVD. Go on eBay, Amazon, and explore the library of David Hofstede, and then join his community at comforttv.blogspot.com. Rewinding and fast-forwarding isn't just something we do with DVDs and VHS tapes for you oldies out there, but it's also a phenomenon that happens when we go to sleep and we dream. Many of our dreams are about issues and people and events from our past, but an equal number of dreams are about the future. And sometimes it's just a flash forward that we may not even realize is a dream that shows us the possibility of tomorrow. But our dream interpreter says, not so fast, stop and analyze those dreams. Even those short vignettes that don't seem to have much of a story to them, they can be very potent, and they can give you clues about how to reimagine your life and change your reality. And check out her website at YvonneRyba.com, YvonneRyba.com, and stay tuned now for our latest trek into the subconscious with Yvonne Ryba. Hi again, Yvonne. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you, Chris.
Wonderful. Well, here we are in June already, my goodness. And this episode, we're airing part 2 of actress Jaime Lyn Bauer's interview. And she talks about how at a certain age, it's more difficult for probably a lot of different professions, for actors in particular, to get continual employment. So how she's sort of reinvented herself in financial planning with a group called People Helping People. And it really seems to have expanded her outlook on life again, and it's so exciting to hear. But many of us reach those crossroads, whether it's career or a relationship or something where we feel stuck. So any dreams that sort of give us inspiration of looking at things differently?
Yes, surely.
Good, good.
Oh, I've had a few of those.
And sometimes we don't necessarily see the symbolism in the dream. How can you help us see that a little clearer?
Okay, well, one of the things that you have to pay attention to is when you wake up, you have to, how do you feel? Analyze it. Do you feel happy or down or irritated or whatever the emotion is? What are you feeling? And the dream is conveying something to you, which even though you don't understand the symbolism, that doesn't matter. Subconsciously, you do understand it, and you are getting an emotion that connects with it.
Yes.
So when you feel very happy, it means this is a really good dream that's giving you some great direction.
Okay.
And I have a dream that I had many, many years ago, and I can't remember whether it was before or after I'd been to Italy. But, I mean, I know what Italy looks like. Anyway, this dream, I am suddenly aware that I'm standing on a very wide balcony. When I say balcony, it's not really a balcony. It's more like a marble-floored outside room with beautiful marble pillars around it and stairs leading down. But you can't see where the stairs are going because they go down a slope because you're outside. And in the distance, you can see the ocean. And around it, of course, there's some kind of a bay with trees here and there and all the rest of it. It's very, very beautiful. And there is this table in front of these marble pillars. And I'm looking at the table and I think, what am I doing here? And some men came out, and they were dressed like waiters, very high-class type waiters, you know. And they had this fabulous tablecloth. It was absolutely beautiful. And they put it on this table and went back in, started bringing out food. And they brought dishes and dishes of the most wonderful-looking food. And there were on my favorite things there. Raspberries is one of my favorite fruits, and there was bowls of these raspberries and strawberries and cream and all sorts of things. But there was also smoked salmon, and there was beautiful cakes and breads, but there was lots of lovely, like, you know, chicken legs or whatever it is. You know, I can't remember all the food, but I remember thinking, oh, my goodness, there's so much here that is my favorite. It's just so wonderful. And then I thought, but what's going on? There must be a party, even a wedding, because this looks so fabulous, this food. And I'm here, I'm not invited, at least I can't remember being invited to anything. And then people started to show up, dressed up beautifully for this kind of soiree-type evening. And then there was champagne. I remember that as well. There was some gorgeous wines and things showing up too. And I don't know, somehow I found myself being included in this and helping myself and being sort of part of it.
Okay.
I realized that I was expected to share. I was expected to be in on this, whatever it was, this party. And it was fine. I mean, they were like looking at me like, well, you're supposed to be here.
Oh, that's nice. You weren't escorted out of the room.
No, and I was thinking, what am I doing here? But apparently I should have been there in the first place. That's where I'm supposed to have been. So then I woke up, and I felt really good. I thought, oh, what a fabulous dream. It was just absolutely gorgeous. And then I started to analyze it, and I recognized the symbols, of course. First of all, we've got the food, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Now, food nurtures us and nourishes us, right? And it can do that in the dream as a symbol of the mind, the body, or the spirit. It can be a combination, or it can be just the one. But it said to me that life is offering you the things that delight you most. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to stand back there and say, I don't think I'm part of this. I don't think I'm invited. But then I was invited. I was made aware that I was part of this thing, this whole shindig that was going on, that everything was beautiful and perfect, even the tablecloth. I mean, everything. The view was beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You look down on this vista of the ocean, the sky, and then we were up on, I suppose, the side of a mountain or something. I couldn't see what the building was behind me because I never looked back. I only looked outward. And I think that's also symbolic, too, that you look out and there is this incredible opportunity.
Look forward. Yeah. I love the ocean, that vista. To me, that feels like it represents sort of a limitless life,
Yes, it is. The horizon was wide open. There was no narrow feeling to this. It was very expansive.
And so for people that sometimes feel boxed in, whether they're at a job or some part of their life where they just feel stuck or in a box, just visually remember that we have the choice to look at life differently and in an expansive way.
Right. Well, you just mentioned before about your interview, the second part with Jaime Lyn Bauer.
Yes.
And how she had changed her life. Now, you see, that's what this dream was on about. It said, don't be looking in just one direction, one narrow thing.
Yes.
Open up to all that is available, and you can be excited, replenished, fulfilled in whatever it is. And the food represented that to me. I mean, I could have the things that I like the best.
Great.
It wasn't bread and butter, which is okay, but, who goes to a party for bread and butter? The party is life. And the waiters looked, very good too. I mean, they were in these beautiful outfits. And this is like everything in life will offer you the highest quality if you will accept it. You have to go up to the table and help yourself.
There you go. So, very cool. Who would think that just a sort of a vignette like that would have such a deep meaning?
Absolutely. And it was very impressive for me, and I have remembered it. I mean, I wrote it down, but I have remembered that dream for years and years. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's got to be probably about 30 years or so since I had that dream.
It must have been potent then.
Very. But here's an interesting thing, since you asked about this kind of dream. About 2 nights ago, I had a dream, so it gone from 30-some years back up to the present. And I had a long dream, which I can't remember the part of it, and I think that's probably because I got woken up by a cat or a dog or something, which we have a few here. But I hung on to the image at the end, and it was different, but it had a similar meaning. Okay, so I find myself, I come into this enormous room. In fact, as a room, it didn't seem to have a ceiling, which is also symbolic, not having a ceiling. But there was this beautiful big white wall, and it's kind of curved, and it reminded me a little bit of the Star Trek, the bridge on the Enterprise.
Oh, yeah, where Sulu and Captain Kirk and
the whole bunch. Only there weren't all these chairs or anything there. It was just the wall with all these instruments set into it. And there were big and small dials with numbers on them and all that stuff. There were buttons, there were levers, there was all sorts of stuff on this wall. And it went right up. I mean, I don't know how I'd have got up there, but apparently you could. You probably in dreams you could float up there, but
right.
I was looking at it and I thought, wow, look at this. It's a work of art. It was fabulous. You know, I used to be an art teacher and I appreciated the colors of the dials and all the other stuff on this white background. But I looked at it and I felt really good about it.
Okay.
When I woke up, and that was it, okay? When I woke up, I thought, a control room. Okay. Well, I get it.
Play on words.
Yes, you're good. You remembered. Play on words, very important. So here I am, and I am in front of it, and it was like, you see, you can choose what you want to happen. You can control things. It's almost like you're in control of the world or something.
Yes.
It was so complicated. But it's not. It's just your life in the world, and you're in control. Now, you can do stuff to change it. See, you can decide to go down this pathway or that pathway, take this job or that job, marry this person or that person. There's all these choices that you have, and each one leads you onto a different route. But this is what this war was about. It was about me picking and choosing and controlling things. But I could be in control. There's nothing more satisfying than being in control of something, you know, whether it's your car or the dog when you're walking it or whatever it is. You know, you like to be in control.
Yes.
You can't be in control of everything. I know that. But it's sort of very gratifying to know that you're making choices that give you a sense of fulfillment in what you're doing. And that's important to me.
I like it. So two different dreams, but sort of a similar thread here, that these big images were letting you know that you had some power in your life. You had new ways of looking at things, and you literally had sort of choices at your fingertips, so to speak.
That is absolutely right. It's one of my things in life. We've talked about my science of mind background and so on. Is to, first of all, to become empowered ourselves, and then to empower those around us.
Great.
And as a teacher, I was very aware. I wanted the children, I taught high school, here they are all headed off to college or wherever, out into the world, and I wanted them to be able to do the best for themselves. There's nothing more, it's quite horrible, as a matter of fact, to see kids 17, 18 with nothing in front of them, and they just have no hope. You know, well, I can't make it, you know, nobody else made it in my family, so I'm not going to try, and that kind of attitude. So it's kind of depressing, but to empower the people is an incredible thing. So that's the thing in my dream, you know, that I am capable of doing it, and of course I hope that he can pass it on to others.
I agree completely. I helped raise my sister's 3 kids who are now in their 20s, and it all starts with having a vision and being able to see the possibilities in life, no matter what your mom did or your dad did or whatever your circumstances may be presently. You have a choice to look at things differently and pursue, you know, your dream, so to speak.
That's right. Exactly.
Interesting stuff, as always. I appreciate it, and thank you again, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chris. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Reimagine That with Chris Mann was brought to you by Retroality TV. Copyright 2013 by Chris Mann. You can find us at retroality.tv and at reimaginethat.libsyn.com. Tweet us at retroalitytv or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/retroalitytv. And don't forget to check out our TV channel at youtube.com/retroalitytv. In closing, let's all think fondly back to our childhood days, spent in the comforting glow of our curved television's red, green, and blue dotted cathode ray tube. And we should have sympathy for today's youth, who will never share that same experience. After all, it can't be very easy warming up to a 70-inch plasma screen mounted high above your head.